Good morning. I'm here to call the State Water Control Board to order on Thursday, March 27th. And before we get into the agenda items, I do have some rules, but I also want to have the board to introduce themselves, and I'll start down here to my left, please.
Tommy Brannon from Henrico County.
Jared Kilgore, Henrico County.
Scott Cameron, Fairfax County.
Robert Dunn, Chester, Virginia.
Stephen Yob, Henrico County.
Mike Rolban, Director DEQ.
Thank you very much, and I am Lou Ann Wallace from deep Southwest Virginia. So before we get started, I have some rules that I need to read. I should have these memorized, but I don't, so here we go. Attendees may not erect any signage inside or outside the meeting room or the building. Attendees are not entitled to be disorderly or disrupt the meeting from proceeding in an orderly, efficient, effective fashion. Disruptive behavior may result in recess or removal from the meeting. Possession or use of any device that may disrupt the conduct of business is prohibited, including but not limited to voice amplification equipment, bullhorns, blowhorns, sirens, or other noise-producing devices, as well as signs on sticks, poles, or stakes, or helium-filled balloons. Any attendees are asked to be very respectful of all speakers. Rules will be enforced fairly and impartially, not only to ensure the effective and efficient conduct of business, but also to ensure no interference with the business of the complex, its employees, and guests. Attendees wishing to record the proceedings are welcome to do so. However, you may not interfere with the business of the meeting or impede the view or participation of other meeting attendees and staff. No smoking is allowed unless in a designated outside space, and this includes tobacco and e-cigarettes. No alcohol, fireworks, pyrotechnics, weapons, or any substances, items controlled by law are allowed. No firearms are allowed in the state's contracted spaces except for firearms carried by law enforcement officers or authorized security personnel. All violators may be subject to removal from the meeting facility. Anyone removed from the facility may not re-enter, and anyone who fails to comply with removal may be charged with trespass. Thank you all for listening this morning. So we'll move ahead to our agenda items, and on tab A, you will find the minutes from the December 4th, 2024 meeting. And I hope everyone has had a chance to look at that. You've also had your minute number 5 has been replaced in your packet today. So that may be a little different, but anyway, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Now, moving along to final regulations, we have the sewage collection and treatment regulations, which is 9 VAC 25-790, which is an amendment to include a reporting requirement for all septic systems taken offline and connected to sewage systems. That's in tab B. Ms. Golly.
Madam Chair.
I apologize. Mr. Yob has a statement, please.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Director, I've submitted to DEQ staff a signed transactional disclosure statement pursuant to the Virginia State and Local Government Conflict of Interests Act before participating in or voting on agenda items up for consideration today. I have a personal interest affected by transactions being considered by the board this morning due to my employment as a Deputy County Manager for Community Operations with the County of Henrico, Virginia. Henrico County, like other Virginia localities, administers Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Programs, VSMP, holds groundwater withdrawal permits and permits for other activities related to the Virginia Water Protection Program, and is further subject to sewage collection and treatment regulations. While I do have this interest, I herewith certify that I am able to participate in items under consideration today in tabs B, D, E, and F, both fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Yob. I apologize again. Ms. Galley?
Good morning. Is that working?
There's a mod to turn the
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Laura Galli, and I am with the Office of IPTIS Permits. We are considering the Sewage Collection and Treatment Regulations 9 VSC 25790 amendment. We are at the final stage of the process, and we will be asking that the board adopt the amendment as final. In July 2018, the Environmental Protection Agency issued state basin planning targets for nitrogen and phosphorus in Virginia's 5 river basins draining to the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay TMDL Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan, the WIP 3, represents the Commonwealth's plan to achieve nutrient and sediment reductions needed to restore the Chesapeake Bay and its tidal tributaries. Virginia's WIP 3 was completed in August 2019, and it details best management practices necessary to achieve these planning targets. Initiative 53 of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL WIP 3 was introduced to require reporting of sewer connections by wastewater utilities. Therefore, this regulatory action amends the existing sewage collection and treatment regulations to include a reporting requirement for all septic systems taken offline and connected to sewage collection systems. This requirement will ensure a more accurate count of nutrient reductions resulting from these connections. The Notice of Intended Regulatory Action was published on September 11, 2023, and ran through October 11, 2023. The public comment period was extended then to December 6, 2023, due to issues related to DQ staff emails not accepting public comments during a portion of the time, but no comments were received during the NOER. 2 regulatory advisory panel meetings were held, the first on February 29th and the second on April 12, 2024. 7 individuals participated in the RAP, representing 7 localities and organizations. A notice of public comment was then authorized by the board on June 25th, 2024, and a public comment period ran from October 21st through December 20th, 2024, and 1 comment was received, and no public hearing was held. The comment was submitted by a private citizen and was supportive of the amendment as proposed. The comment recommended expanding the regulation to include data and permits from the Virginia Department of Health and private septic systems installers and contractors. DQ recommended no changes to the proposed language, while the Virginia Department of Health has its own reporting requirements for on-site septic systems. Such requirements are not under DQ's purview or authority. The comment also recommended adding a requirement to report the exact locations and watersheds where the improvements are occurring to measure water quality improvements. DQ recommended no change. The amendment, as proposed, allows affected permittees and localities to collect and report additional information, such as the location of the septic systems, while preventing the regulation from creating compliance issues or being punitive to permittees. We have a couple of changes since the proposed stage. We added a deadline for the first reporting requirement, which will be February 1st, 2027, to improve clarity as to when the reporting requirement will go into effect. And we added the word permanently to the number of on-site sewage systems taken offline to clarify that this requirement will apply to those systems that are taken offline permanently. This amendment will result in a new subsection, 9 VSC 25-790-985, and will read as follows. On or before February 1st, 2027, and annually thereafter, every permitted sewage treatment works within the Chesapeake Bay watershed shall report to the department, to the best of the permitted sewage treatment works knowledge, the number of on-site sewage systems taken offline permanently and connected to sewage systems that convey sewage to the permitted sewage treatment works facility during the previous calendar year. Any questions?
Any questions from the board at this time? Hearing none, you may proceed.
Okay. The staff recommends that the board adopt the amendment to the sewage collection treatment regulations, 9 VC 25 790 985, as presented to you today as a final regulation.
We have staff recommendation. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the staff recommendation.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from this board? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, moving along to tab C, we have water quality standards, rulemaking to adopt site-specific selenium aquatic life criteria for the 4 streams, which are tributaries to the Knox Creek in Buchanan County.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Tish Robertson. I'm the Water Quality Standards Scientist here in the Office of Ecology, and I'm going to be asking for permission for our final adoption on some amendments to the Water Quality Standards Regulation for site-specific selenium criteria. Selenium is an essential micronutrient for all animals, including humans, but of course it can be toxic in large enough doses. And selenium is unusual for aquatic life pollutants in that it bioaccumulates in aquatic organisms. So that means that the effects ecologically that it has tends to be over a long-term chronic exposure. And we're looking at things, impacts to reproduction, to larval, juvenile fish growth that can lead to, of course, mortality. And so we tend to find selenium as a problem due to land disturbance activities. It is a common impurity to metal sulfide ores, so we do see it in association with mining activities. But it is also used in glass making, pigment production, solar cells, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to provide an overview of the rulemaking to date on the proposed amendments. And so things were initiated April 26, 2023, when DEQ staff received a petition from Clintwood JOD, mining company in Southwest Virginia. The petition requested the promulgation of site-specific selenium criteria to protect aquatic life in 4 tributaries to Knox Creek in Buchanan County. And so in August 23, 2023, DEQ staff went in front of the board to ask for permission to proceed with a rulemaking consistent with the petitioner's request, and the board granted us permission on that. February 26, 2024, notice of intended regulatory action was published, and this comes with a 30-day public comment period that closed March 27, 2024. And then April 24, 2024, DEQ convened a regulatory advisory panel. We held a meeting in Grundy. Grundy was chosen because it is in close proximity to the identified water bodies. And then June 25th, 2024, we went back to the board and we were given permission to proceed to notice of public comment. And so that public comment period started October 7th and went through December 6th, 2024. During that period, we did hold a public hearing as required. And so this was a hearing that we held in Grundy. Again, Madam Chair was kind enough to be our hearing officer. This was held on November 14th, 2024. So the geographic scope of the proposed amendments are limited to a watershed, the Tug Fork watershed, which is shown there in the left in the circle. So it's right at the nexus of Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia. And on the right there, we see the named water bodies in the petition. So Knox Creek is the riverine feature that kind of cuts a diagonal across the screen there. That is not actually named in the petition. It's the 4 tributaries to Knox Creek, which would be the subject of this rulemaking. So those would be Race Fork and its tributaries, Pounding Mill Creek and its tributaries, Right Fork of Lester Fork and its tributaries, and Abner's Fork and its tributaries. The flow of Knox Creek goes into Kentucky and then flows into West Virginia. Now I will present the site-specific criteria that we're talking about. These were published by EPA in 2016, so these are nationally recommended criteria. And I'm going to slip up, I'm sorry. It's a criterion that EPA has recommended. It's a criterion that's expressed in multiple ways. So it has 2 expressions in different media, one in fish tissue, one in water column, and then it's further broken out by fish egg ovary, fish whole body, fish muscle, and then within the water column medium, we're talking about different values for lentic versus lotic waters. So lentic waters would be impounded waters that have very little flow, like reservoirs, and lotic waters are free-flowing streams and rivers. And then there are different values for different durations. So the 30-day mean is the default, and then you can also calculate a criterion for shorter durations of the discharge. So these are some complexities that are new to us for aquatic life pollutants. This is the first aquatic life criterion recommended by EPA that is expressed in fish tissue. Another complicating feature to the criteria are that these criteria elements are hierarchical. So the fish egg ovary supersedes or has primacy over all the other elements, and I am going to explain why that is. So these are just some features that make the implementation of this criterion a bit more challenging than what we're used to. So this chart is comparing, table, the proposed criteria at the top of the chart there, and then the current selenium criterion. So the bottom there, there actually is 2 separate criteria. There's a chronic 4-day average, and then there's the acute criterion, that's a 1-hour average. And you notice that there are no fish tissue values because the original selenium criteria did not have fish tissue expression. And so at the top of the table there, those are the proposed criteria. Those are recommended by EPA currently, and you have expressions in the different elements, egg, ovary, whole body, muscles, lentic, lotic for monthly 30-day mean, and then there's an intermittent exposure equation that's provided to calculate a criterion for durations shorter than 30 days. And so the fish tissue elements cannot be exceeded at any time. The water column values can be exceeded only once in 3 years, which is standard for aquatic life pollutants. And so currently in the named water bodies in the petition as well as statewide, we're looking at the values there at the bottom. The proposed amendments would be for those named water bodies, they would receive those criteria at the top. So we did hold a comment period. October 7th went through December 6th, 2024. We received 5 comments. Most of the comments were in support of the rulemaking, the proposed amendments, but we did get some critical feedback. Appalachian Voices oppose this rulemaking. This was a kind of a reiteration of comments submitted to us earlier. And there were 2 other signatories to this letter, Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards and Sierra Club. So the commenter does not believe that the fish tissue data should be given more weight than the water column data, and also believes that water column measurements taken directly from point source outfalls should determine compliance in fishless waters. DEQ's response is to just reiterate what's in EPA's recommendations. So EPA recommends that the fish tissue data be given more weight than the water column data. And this is because the fish tissue concentrations are considered more reliable, meaningful indicator of potential ecological impacts than the water column concentrations. The toxicity data that were used to develop the criteria really were looking at egg ovary concentrations, not water column concentrations. Furthermore, we have proposed language that will reference the EPA recommended procedures on implementation in fishless waters. EPA also pointed out to us that we had some discrepancies in our original proposed amendments relative to their recommendation. And this is because they had made an update to their language in their criteria recommendation in 2021. And we weren't aware that there were changes to the language. And so we have corrected the original proposed amendments to reflect the EPA, the later update to EPA's recommendation. We do not believe that the changes are substantive. We received comments in support of the rulemaking from Virginia Department of Energy. Virginia Energy would be the agency that would be doing much of the implementation of the criterion in the named water bodies. They've stated their support for the proposed amendments and believe that the proposed criterion would provide greater flexibility in permit writing. And then we received comments from the staff biologist and environmental manager at Clintwood JOD expressing support for the proposed amendments, confidence that Virginia would be able to implement the criterion successfully, belief that the fish tissue elements are more meaningful than the water column elements, and the opinion that the criterion is protective of downstream waters in West Virginia and Kentucky. And those 2 states are currently implementing similar criteria to what we're proposing for the named water bodies. As I stated, we have made changes since proposed. There are a number of footnotes to the criterion that we are proposing to adopt, and EPA had noted that the footnotes weren't fully in line with their footnotes. We have inserted a language stating that when selenium inputs are increasing, water column criteria values should be used. And I will pause here for questions.
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Robertson?
I have one, ma'am.
Mr. Yaw?
Ms. Robertson, I was just curious, you've got criteria for eggs, ovaries, and muscles, and then the whole body is lower than either of those, which of course they're a component of the whole body. So could you offer some explanation for that?
Sure. So the egg ovaries, as I said, those were kind of really the basis of the toxicity studies that were done to come up with the criterion. And eggs are very fatty. And so the concentrations there are going to be, there's more of a potential for bioaccumulation, right? The other elements are derived from the egg ovary concentrations through modeling. And so it's not that there were toxicity tests done to determine what would be protective for a whole body for the fillet muscle. It was just a conversion of what's in the egg. That's what's going to be in the other tissues. And those tissues, I guess you could say they're not just fat, like the eggs. Eggs are very fatty. So the concentration is going to be less because you're dealing with lean tissue in those other elements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, you may proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Staff recommends the board adopt all final amendments to the water quality standards at 9 VAC 25-260-310 and 9 VAC 25-260-490 as presented in the board materials.
You've heard staff recommendation. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I would move that we accept the staff recommendation for adoption of these final amendments to the water quality standards.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Yob. Do I have a second?
Second.
I got a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Next, in tab D, you have non-VAC 25-210, Virginia Water Protection Permit Regulation, and non-VAC 25610, Groundwater Withdrawal Regulations. These are amendments establishing criteria for water auditing plans and leak detection and repair plans, and requiring applications to include plans that is required by Chapter 100 of the 2021 Special Session Acts of the Assembly. And that should be in your tab D. And Mr. Seavey.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Eric Seavey. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, good. Sorry, I tend to talk softly sometimes. My name is Eric Seavey. I'm the Office of Water Withdrawal Permitting Manager at DEQ. I'm going to talk today about updates to the Virginia Water Protection Permitting Program Regulation and groundwater withdrawal regulations to incorporate water withdrawal, water auditing plan and leak detection and repair plan requirements. In the presentation, I'm going to go over a brief timeline, overview of the regulation changes, public comments and DEQ responses. There'll be time for questions, and then the final DEQ recommendation. Timeline: Senate Bill 1291 requiring the plans was signed by the governor in March of 2021. I won't go through all these, but the most recent was the public comment period ended in July 19th of 2024. So Senate Bill 1291 required amendments to the code for the Virginia Water Protection permit regulations to incorporate a water auditing plan and leak detection and repair plan. And once approved, these plans would be incorporated by reference to the into the permit. Same requirement for the groundwater regulations. However, it would be incorporated into the existing water conservation and management plan. That is a requirement. Something to note here is that the water conservation management plan is already a requirement in the groundwater regulations. There's already a requirement for the water audit plan and leak detection and repair plans, just amendments to make it more in line with the surface water requirements. So the way I'll structure this, I'll go through the surface water changes and then through the groundwater changes. So for surface water, unless excluded under the regulation, anybody withdrawing 10,000 gallons or more a day for non-agricultural require a permit. Agricultural, it's more than a million gallons per month, which equates to about 30,000 gallons a day. In tidal withdrawals, it's much higher. The amount for a permit for non-ag is 2 million gallons per day. or for agricultural, it's 60 million gallons per month, which equates to about 2 million gallons per day. All right, changes to the regulation involved incorporation of two definitions, one for water loss, which is basically the difference between the water that's withdrawn and then the water put to the beneficial use. And then also a definition for water loss audit, which means review of records and data to calculate that water loss. I'm going to split this up. The way the regulation has been split up for the requirements for both plans is by the use type. So there are three categories. One is public water supply, commercial and industrial, and then agricultural. So for the audit requirement for public water supplies, it requires a plan to be submitted that's in accordance with the American Water Works Association methodology, or some methodology that's approved by the department. The audit is required to be annual for public water supplies, with a report submitted every 3 years. The leak detection and repair plan for public water supplies, the plan is required to state how it is informed by the annual audit. It also has a description of, equipment needs to quantify the loss, and a schedule for inspection of the equipment or systems looking for loss. Something to note from the audit, that's a requirement within the audit itself, is basically a description of this leak detection and repair plan's effectiveness. Commercial and industrial users, the audit is going to be every 3 years, with a report similar to the public water supply on a 3-year basis. The leak detection and repair plan, I won't go through it again, it's basically the same thing, same requirements as for public water supply. For agricultural users, the water audit is to be conducted annually or periodically based on the agricultural management plans or the irrigation management plans in place. The water audit, there needs to be documentation within the first year for all three, for the public water supply and for agriculture on the first year, that the audit has been initiated, and that's in the first 3 years for commercial and industrial. The reporting requirement is the same, it's every 3 years. Leak detection and repair plan requirements for agricultural users is similar. It has to be informed by how it gets informed by the audit, a description of equipment and distribution system losses, and how those will be updated, and inspection. The audit report is to also include a description of the plan's effectiveness. That's a requirement for all three users. I'll move now to groundwater management and the updates to those regulations. There are 2 groundwater management areas in Virginia. Basically, the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area in orange here is east of 95 to the bay or the ocean, and then there's the Eastern Shore groundwater management areas. Anyone withdrawing groundwater from these areas of 300,000 gallons or more in any month will require a permit unless otherwise excluded. So changes included definitions, incorporation of the same water loss definition, the same water loss audit definition, also incorporated as a definition for public water supply, and that's for human consumption for systems that have 15 or more connections or 25 people for at least 60 days a year. And public water supplies can be either private or publicly owned. So changes are very similar, basically the same as for surface water. For public water supplies, the audit, AWWA methodology or something approved by the department on an annual basis, and a report every 3 years. Leak detection and repair plan, basically the same as for surface water withdrawal. Commercial and industrial, once again, the same as for surface water withdrawals, every 3 years, and a report every 3 years. Leak detection and repair plans the same as for public water supplies as far as its requirements. Agricultural audit is the same for surface water. It's a plan to be conducted annually or periodically, and a report is required every 3 years. And then the leak detection and repair plan is a little bit different than for surface water in that there's a bit added here, and that's based on requirements that are already in the Water Conservation and Management Plan. And that's for irrigation plans that are specific to the irrigation system, the management methods, anticipated crop watering, for livestock, the amount of water needed per head, and then there's a requirement if these options are not implemented in the plan, then the leak detection repair plan will have water-saving alternatives listed. Something other of note for the water conservation and management plans, they also have other requirements aside from the audited plan and the leak detection repair plan, and those involve use of water-saving fixtures, water use education, evaluation of water use options, and requirements for mandatory water use restrictions or reductions. Those remain unchanged. So I'll now talk about comments received during the public comment period. We received comments from 7 individuals. A lot of the comments were very similar in nature, so I've basically boiled those down to 11 comments and the responses from the department. One comment involved use of volumetric goals instead of percentage-based goals. These will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So percentage-based goals might be applicable in certain situations. So we didn't make any changes there. There's also a comment for level 1 validation and training to be conducted by a third party. Once again, we look at these on a case-by-case basis, and we wanted to maintain flexibility for complying with the regulatory requirement. And then there was a requirement to making audits reports publicly available. The information will be publicly available. There was a request for definition changes for water loss audit, and what we meant by another methodology approved by the department, and a definition for water users. Aligning these, our response, aligning these definitions to be consistent with specific methodologies would limit the flexibility of the regulation. Also, the types of users are commonly understood terms, so we didn't make any changes there. Recommendations were submitted for compliance and enforcement requirements to be included and reporting requirements. However, the code requirement is for us, basically, the way we covered that is by these plans will be attached to the fact sheet or permit decision rationale, which is attached to the permit. Also, the requirements will be reflected in the permit as requirements there, so to make them enforceable. Let's see. There was a request that the agricultural users have annual audits at a minimum, rather than having that flexibility that we could, look at them on a case-by-case basis. However, agricultural users are oftentimes seasonal, and the frequencies can, it might be more adequate for something other than annual. So we look at those on a case-by-case basis. There was a request that we update public water supply frequency to every 3 years rather than annually. It's my understanding there were significant conversations and discussions regarding during the regulatory advisory panel to develop these regulations as is, and also public water supplies tend to be larger geographically, and therefore the annual water loss frequency is adequate, we felt. There was a comment for an off-ramp where demonstration is provided that water loss would be unlikely. However, the code requires that we implement these plans or have these plans submitted for all permitted facilities. There was a request for addition of some language or methods needed when talking about the process for identification of equipment needs in one of the specific parts of the reg. We're already looking at these on a case-by-case basis to determine their appropriateness. So that flexibility is already there, and we determined that the added language wasn't really needed. Issuance of guidance before the regulation is finalized was requested. The regulation was intended to provide enough detail for minimal guidance. However, if guidance is needed as this program matures, we will develop that in accordance with the APA process. And finally, revisions to other requirements of the groundwater management, water conservation and management plan, the ones that I spoke to earlier that are already in existence were suggested. However, that wasn't as part of this regulatory action to change those. It was specific to the water audit and the leak detection and repair plan, so we didn't make any changes to that. With that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Any
Yes, sir.
questions from the board?
I understand, based on all the public comments, you made no changes.
Correct. Yes, sir.
I had asked earlier if any of the public who made those comments had commented on the fact that you didn't make any changes, and I was told there's none made. Is that still the case?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we issued a response to comments through the town hall document, and we received no comments based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? You may proceed.
Thank you. Staff recommend that the board adopt the amendments to the Virginia Water Protection Program Regulation 9 VAC 25-210 and Groundwater Withdrawal Regulations 9 VAC 25-610 as final regulations.
Thank you. We have staff recommendation. I'll entertain a motion from the board.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to adopt the amendments. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along to tab E, we're looking at fast track. Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation 9 VAC 25-875. Technical corrections, Ms. Roche.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Rebecca Roche, go by Becky. I'm the Director of Stormwater Programs at DEQ. I'm here to present the amendments to the Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation 9 VAC 25-875 to correct technical errors that have been identified since its publication in the Virginia Register of Regulations on December 4th, 2023. This rulemaking is expected to be non-controversial and therefore appropriate for the fast-track rulemaking process. To provide a little background, Chapter 68 and 758 of the 2016 Acts of Assembly, which we call the Consolidation Bill, combine the Stormwater Management Act and Erosion and Sediment Control Law to create Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Act, which became effective on July 1st of 2024. The attendant regulations, the Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation, which we often refer to as the VESM regulation, was approved at the June 22nd, 2023 board meeting, and it also became effective on July 1st of 2024. The proposed technical corrections are intended to improve clarity and certainty by making the VESM regulation internally consistent, by correcting cross-references, accurately reflecting requirements in the state water control law, and provide certainty and clarity to all stakeholders. Just the additional background, this rulemaking is very similar to a fast-track rulemaking that was presented at the June 25th, 2024 board meeting. Following that board meeting, that fast track was released for public comment starting on October 7th, 2024, and it closed on November 6th of 2024. We received 3 separate comments from 2 stakeholders, specifically regarding Section 490, which is related to grandfathering provisions for projects. After review of those comments, DEQ chose to withdraw that fast track action on November 18th, 2024, reevaluate that language. We made changes. We did provide those changes back to the stakeholders who did make comments and make sure that the changes that were made were something that made sense and they all agreed with. I also want to note that this rulemaking also includes updates to Section 580. At the same June 25th, 2024 board meeting, we presented a second fast track that was to remove out-of-date criteria from the regulations. That fast track did go through public comment and will become effective on July 1st, 2025. We did receive a couple minor comments in nature, which we decided to add some additional clarification in this fast track. And so I do want to point out that the regulatory language that's in your board packet represents the actual language that will be effective at the time that this fast track regulation would go in effect. As you can see from the language on the slide, this is just an example of the type of changes that were made. They are very minor, they are technical in nature, and as previously indicated, the amendments are intended to correct those cross-references, have consistency with state law, as well as provide clarity and certainty where there has been confusion in the implementation. In a total, 13 different sections have been updated, as well as the documents incorporated by reference, and all the detailed changes are outlined in the board packet. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? Hearing none, you may proceed.
Great, thanks. Staff recommends the board authorize DEQ to promulgate the proposal for public comment using the fast track process established in Section 2.2-4012.1 of the Administrative Process Act for regulations expected to be non-controversial. The board's authorization constitutes its adoption of the regulation at the end of the public comment period, provided that 1, no objection to the use of the fast track process is received from 10 or more persons or any member of the applicable standing committee of either House of the General Assembly or of the Joint Commission on Administrative Rules, and 2, DEQ does not find it necessary, based on public comments or for any other reason, to make changes to the proposal. And 2, staff also recommends that the board authorize DEQ to set an effective date 15 days after close of the 30-day public comment period, or July 2nd, 2025, whichever is later, provided that 1, the proposal completes the fast track rulemaking process as provided in Section 2.2-4012.1 of the Administrative Process Act, and 2, DEQ does not find it necessary to make any changes to the proposal.
Thank you. We have staff recommendation. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chairman, I move we adopt staff recommendation.
I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
I have several seconds. I'll take one. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next, at this time, we have in your board books other business. So we're going to have some controversial permits.
We have another one.
Where am I? Oh, I'm sorry. You are next, aren't you? I'm trying to push things along. Tab F, I apologize, Ms. Roche. Proposed regulations, Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation, 9-VAC 25875. Change the statewide permit fee schedule in accordance with Chapter 2 of the 2024 Special Sessions First Acts of the Assembly. Again, I apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Again, I'm Rebecca Roche. I'm the Director of Stormwater Programs at DEQ, and I'm here to present proposed amendments to the Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation 9-VAC 25-875. Chapter 2 of the 2024 Special Session 1 Acts of Assembly, the Budget Bill, Item 363J2, directs the board to amend the existing permit fee schedule such that the fees for the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit for discharges of stormwater from construction activities and municipal separate storm sewer system permits are set in an amount representing no less than 60%, but not to exceed 62% of the direct costs for the administration, compliance, and enforcement of such permits. A notice of intended regulatory action to amend the existing permit fee schedule was published on September 9th of 2024. There was a 30-day public comment period that ended on October 9th of 2024. The department received 4 comments. All 4 commenters did request to be members of the regulatory action panel and were approved and did participate on that panel. The regulatory action panel convened on February 7th of 2025. The proposed amendments to the regulation are contained in sections 1360 through 1420. Permit fees are being increased for the following permits: new municipal separate storm sewer system, which I'll refer to as MS4 coverage, MS4 permit major modifications that are initiated by the operator, new coverage under the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit for discharges of stormwater for construction activities. We have both an individual permit option as well as a general permit. I will clarify before moving along, we haven't issued any individual permits, but it is included. So I will commonly refer to this permit as the Construction General Permit moving forward, or CGP. CGP modifications and transfers, and annual maintenance fees for both the MS4 permits and the CGPs, and also any individual permits. I do want to note that fees have not changed in the regulation for more than 15 years. So the Erosion and Stormwater Management Program is funded through fees established pursuant to the regulation. It is necessary to address water quality within the Commonwealth. We started by reviewing the fiscal year 2024 data, as you can see on the screen. The current fee revenue collected from permit fees and applications only covers approximately 38 to 39% of the overall program cost. As previously mentioned, the budget bill directs the board to amend the existing fee schedule such that the fees are set at an amount representing 60 to 62%. As shown on the bottom row of the table, this will result in an increase of approximately 56 to 61% in existing permit fees based on the fiscal year 2024 revenue and expenditures. The first permit that we're going to walk through is the MS4 permit. There's the MS4, just for a reminder, is a network of drainage systems, including pipes, ditches, and other conveyances, designed to carry stormwater runoff directly to nearby streams, rivers, and other bodies of water. There are currently 124 active permits issued throughout the Commonwealth. There are 11 individual permits to medium and large localities. There is 1 small individual permit that is issued to VDOT, and there are 112 small general permits that are issued primarily to state and federal entities, smaller localities, school systems, and also universities. The MS4 permit program is designed to address the unique challenges associated with urban and suburban areas, where stormwater can pick up pollutants from various sources and ultimately discharge into local water bodies. As you can see in the pictures at the top, without an effective permit, there is an increased potential for pollutants to enter waterways and maintain stormwater facilities that are not functioning as intended. Below at the bottom are the pictures of successful MS4 practices. Regarding the MS4 permit fees, 3 sections of the regulation are proposed to be changed. Section 1380 is for new permit issuances. Just for note, in fiscal year 24, DEQ did not issue any new MS4 permits. Section 1390 is for major modifications of individual permits requested by the operator. And Section 1420 is for permit maintenance fees for existing permits. Here are 2 examples of two of the 3 schedules being revised, and you can see the approximate 61% increase. The top table is again for new permit issuances, and the bottom table is the one used the most, is permit maintenance fees for that are charged annually to existing permittees. So you can see that's a 61% increase in the tables. The second permit that we're going to focus on is the Construction General Permit, and this permit's fee schedule is very unique. The program operation is also very unique compared to the other permits issued by the department. The VIPD's permit, or the Construction General Permit, I'll just shorthand it, the Administration, Compliance, and Enforcement falls under, while DEQ does issue all the permits are issued by the Department of Environmental Quality. There are local authorities, and as you can see, they're actually highlighted in green, that do the enforcement, the oversight, and compliance and plan reviews associated with the administration of those permits. So the fee schedule is separated. The fee is submitted to the local authority. DEQ obtains a portion for all permits as we do issue all the permits. There is, and in anywhere where that is highlighted that is in white, DEQ is the stormwater authority. DEQ does not only issues, again, all the permits, but in those areas we do the plan review, the enforcement, the compliance, and the inspections associated. So this permit's different because you may have, while all permits are issued by DEQ, I just want to be clear, there are local program authorities that do administer the programs locally, and those are all highlighted in green. There's about 93 local authorities throughout the Commonwealth. So we did look at how the permits are broken out in fiscal year 24. While all the permits are issued by DEQ, about 27% of those permits are administered, and we do the compliance inspection and enforcement, and 73% are done by the local program authorities that you saw highlighted in green on the previous slide. We also looked at the area based on total permitted disturbed area. The permits are based on the actual disturbed area. The fee schedules are broken out based on the amount of area and increases anywhere 1 to 5, all the way up to if you're greater than 100. As you can see, DEQ, while only 27 of the permits are we performing inspections and compliance, the disturbed acreage is 49%. So as the projects get larger, they appear to be more in the areas where are opt-out localities, as we call them, so DEQ is doing that. So we broke this up just so you can get an idea of how those permits are separated. And to go even further, this is how they are broken up per the fee schedule. And you can see that the majority of the permits fall between 1 to 5 acres of total land disturbance. But as we go up in size, you can see the DEQ's portion of those permits increases, which goes in line with the two charts previously shown. Controlling erosion and stormwater from land disturbing activities and its impacts is a serious issue throughout Commonwealth and its local governments. Numerous studies have documented the cumulative effects of urbanized stormwater on stream and watershed ecologies. These pictures, as you can see, show issues with land disturbing activities and regulations and the CGP are intended to address. The erosion and stormwater management permit program includes plan review, permit review and issuance, inspections, compliance assistance, enforcement, program administration, permit termination, guidance, development, and local program assistance. So there's a lot that goes into the program. While all localities that operate a program are implementing it, DEQ prepares all the guidance documents, and the several examples are provided on the screen, including our handbook. We provide model ordinances and support to all localities on a regular basis. We get complaints, we do those inspections in those areas when we get those complaints, and we receive and provide support questions to help authorities operate and implement their programs successfully on the local level as well. 3 sections of the regulation are being modified relating to construction general permits. Section 1400 are fees for new individual permit or coverage under the construction general permit. Section 1410 are fees related to modification or transfers of any of those permits. And Section 1420 are the permit annual maintenance fees. Now I'm going to try my best to explain this table as best that I can, as it does get a little complicated, but as I tried to explain earlier, the fees are broken up by permit size. And highlighted in gray are the existing fees. To lower the increase in the total fee portion for the total permit fee paid to the department by local program authorities was increased from 28 to 30. The state code actually allows that the DEQ portion of all fees to be capped at 30. Years ago, it was selected for 28%. We chose to increase it to 30 as a result of giving additional revenue towards operating the overall Commonwealth program. However, by doing that, it does allow us to reduce the total fee a little bit to provide a little offset. So just an example of trying to explain that, we did 61% increase on the DEQ portion and then backed out to what would be the total fee if we had at 30%. If we had increased the fee for over 100 acres at just the 9,600 by 61%, the fee would be closer to 15,000. So by being able to increase DEQ portion by 2%, we were able to have that fee around 14,300. So it lowers it a little bit, the total fee a little bit, by increasing the DEQ portion by 2% and allowing additional revenue into the program. This is another one of the tables that's a straight increase of 61%. This is the annual maintenance fees that are paid, that the permittees paid annually. And then finally, changes do include the addition of a Section 1375 of a Consumer Price Index annual adjustment factor to provide a mechanism to ensure that fees keep pace with the cost of doing business. This language is actually consistent with what's been used in other permits that are issued by the department. Any questions?
Yes.
Absolutely.
The General Assembly mandate, which that's what I'm going to choose to call it, tells us to set the amount representing no less than 60%, not to exceed 62% of the direct cost of administration. It looks like we have gone in and just added 60%. What is the cost of administration? Because that's where I think we're mandated.
So this, I'm going to go back because I think it would be helpful to see the overall cost and how we got here.
Right.
We looked at the total cost. The cost of this program actually, you have construction general permit, which is one of the permits. The MS4 is the other permit. There's also the nutrient credit exchange program. That was not part of the notice of intended regulatory action, so we did not touch those fees. We looked at the total cost of operating a program for DEQ, that total personnel and that is the total cost. And we looked at the total fees that we actually did obtain based on the permits that were received in the exact same fiscal year as those costs. So we decided, instead of doing evaluation of multiple years, that the data was, there's some variation. This is a clear indication of most recent data that we have from fiscal 2024 showing the direct cost at DEQ to implement the whole program, as well as the total revenue that was received by these. And determined that right now we're about 38 to 39%. We're not covering the cost of that program. So looking at the difference, we calculated what would be the percentage that you would need to increase the straight fees across the board for clear calculation, and picked, it ends up being to get to 62, since these fees have not been increased by 15 years. To get to 62%, the numbers, I know, hold on, I don't know what's, let me get that to go away. The numbers are very close, so it may seem a little confusing, and I was afraid of that. But to get to 62% of the total program cost, we would need to raise all the fees by 61%. It just, math just was a really close number, so it may seem like we picked 61. 61 is actually, we need to get to 62, to cover 62% of $8 million. We need an additional 1.91 million, which equates to increasing all the fees about 61%. So that was based on actual data.
And how did this come about from the General Assembly? Did we report that we weren't collecting the costs? Maybe.
This is actually going back to 2016 or so.
Okay.
So Dave Bulova originally introduced legislation, and so DCR set the original fees based on just a wild-ass guess, and it was too low. And so it's been discussed for many, many years, and eventually his thing passed through, and then we spent the last 3 years talking about it in Patrick Henry Building, and then got authority to go ahead and implement it. So the governor put it in his bill. It's been in the budget bill at least 3 times now, at least last 3 years, but this year he introduced it. It was his budget, and we're going forward. And the problem we're having is we have to use general revenue to subsidize this program. And it was supposed to be mostly fee supported, so we have to keep shrinking back on other areas. And then additionally, a lot of the inspections, like this has not been a great weekend for me for all the complaints about erosion control and stormwater management inspections. We only have 21 inspectors for 6,000 roughly construction sites. We just don't have the money to hire more. So it's kind of a combination. We used another source of money to upgrade or replace the 30-year-old manual. So that was close to $1 million of work that we didn't put in here. We did it with other sources, and that's done now. So we're trying to get the whole program way more efficient, and we've done it, through a new handbook, new requirements, new training programs. All that was not in this cost.
Correct.
And we've reduced the time it takes to process the permits substantially, but we still are just underwater.
So this is, your recommendation is to send it out for public comment, correct? So
Correct.
if
This
the
is a
public
proposed.
outraged, then we'll know about it.
Yes,
Got
this
it
will
the
come
next
back to
meeting.
you
Yeah.
before it would become final, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to add, before you, the General Assembly was outraged that we were not charging enough, so it's just catch up, but sorry, Steve.
It's okay, sure.
Mr. O'Shea, first of all, to the department, I would laud you for adding the CPI into this equation, because so often with these fee updates, as you noted, 15 years down the road, the dollar is only buying half of what it did initially, so that's a good thing. We don't have to revisit this issue, hopefully, every year. Secondly, I would note, Mr. Director and Ms. Roche, that I frequently, as one of the larger MS4 communities in the Commonwealth, have to get technical expertise from the department, and recently we had a discussion about one. And I am always under pressure from the development community because they think that we, Henrico County, are overreaching and we're doing something that is adverse or in addition to or beyond your requirements. And so having appropriate, qualified individuals like yourself to call on to review these issues with is very important to me. We want to make sure we're consistent with state and federal guidance, we're not overreaching, and I do need that backup. So I am fully in support of the department having the resources to administer these programs professionally, competently, and with good science. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
I'd just like to echo what my colleague said in terms of the CPI. I think that's a really smart move.
Thank you. Great. Staff recommends that the board authorize a public comment period and the public hearing for amendments to the fee schedule in the Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation 9 VAC 25875. Staff also recommends that the board authorize DEQ to staff to serve as the hearing officer at the public hearing.
Thank you. Board, you've heard staff recommendation. What's your pleasure?
I so move. We approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you. I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Have a second. Thank you, gentlemen. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, will this board be notified when Craig said public hearing is?
Yes, Mr. Brandon wants to know if this board will be notified upon public comment or notification, right? Would you please? Thank you. Okay, moving on to other business now with Mr. Thomas. You're going to report to the board the controversial permits, and we'll start out with Centegro Central LLC, Westmoreland County.
Very good. Good morning. Excuse me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Bryant Thomas. I am our Water Division Interim Director, and as noted, I'm here to provide a controversial permit report. State code provides that at each of the meetings of the board, the department will provide an overview and update regarding any controversial permit that is pending before the department. And a controversial permit includes a permitting action for which a public hearing has been granted. So we do have several on our agenda this morning to talk through. The first one I'm going to note, the Centegro Central LLC Westmoreland County permit. It's a Virginia Pollution Abatement Permit, or VPA permit, VPA 00835. This permit modification application has been withdrawn. So that withdrawal means we have canceled the public hearing. And so it's really no longer on our controversial permit list, but I just wanted to cover this with you this morning, that the update to this. And it's really because the modification processing would have overlapped with actually the permit renewal. And I'll mention that for VPA permits, the permit terms are 10-year permit terms. So this item for the Westmoreland County permit is no longer in a controversial permits category. So we'll move to the Synagro Central LLC Essex County permit. And this is VPA permit VPA 00831. And these permits, in this particular case, Synagro holds a contract with multiple wastewater treatment plants to land apply biosolids. So that is the treated sewage sludge. The VPA regulations require a separate permit for each land applier in each county in which they apply biosolids. Each permit that is issued authorizes multiple land application sites. And if a land applier wants to add additional acreage or additional land application sites, a permit modification is required. As far as walking through kind of the history or the schedule of events associated with this particular permit, the permit was issued in July of 2016 for 15,331 acres. In July of 2019, a modification was approved, adding additional acreage, 4,330 acres. And then in July of 2024, we received an application modification for adding an additional 6,337 acres. And to give you a sense of what this looks like, the map on the top right shows on the eastern half of the state where Essex County is located. And it's called out in the yellow highlighted portion. And then the call-out map in the center shows the existing acreage, those parcels, those polygons that you see in there in green that are currently authorized, those 19,661 acres. And then in the burgundy color, you can see the proposed or requested additional acreage of 6,337 acres, which would bring this to a total of 25,759 acres in Essex County. To continue with the chronology or the history of this particular permitting action, we received the application in July of 2024. We held a public meeting to discuss the application in October. In December, the draft permit was submitted to the applicant, and then a public comment period on a draft permit was held between January 8th and February 7th earlier this year. The public comments were received. We received 27 comments. 26 of those requested a public hearing, and the comments received pertained to the per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, effects on wildlife and shellfish, concerns with other contaminants and unknown constituents in biosolids, and all associated as well with protection of public health. Closing the comment period, DEQ granted a request for a public hearing just earlier this month on March 10th. The date of the public hearing is scheduled for May 19th. There will be a public comment period associated with that, April 16th through June 4, and we are expecting late in the summer, July time period, to hold a summary of public hearing comments. I will pause there with this first permit to see if there are any questions.
Any questions from the board? I do have just one. So looking back at this colored map of the permit modification request here, thank you. So this big green space up here, are we talking do you have buffer zones? What kind of buffers are there before it gets into the streams?
So this shows the acreage that would be the possibility for land applying. And then the permit has special requirements and conditions for buffers, for amounts of application, there are slope restrictions. So the permit does have safeguards to ensure that the material is applied appropriately and it's not applied adjacently right next to the stream or right next to the river in that
Yeah,
case.
remind me, I've been through this before, but I can't remember exactly what we decided on as buffers. And you may not have that.
Well, I may not have it directly, but our
It's here.
manager of our program who is here, Neil Zaraka, can help us out and answer specific questions pertaining to buffers.
Madam Chair, I'm Neil Zarodka, manager of DEQ's Office of Land Application Programs. So the buffers, the setbacks to surface waters varies depending on the circumstances. It is a 100-foot setback unless there's a 35-foot permanent vegetated buffer. In that case, it's 35 feet. If the water body, the segment is listed as a public water supply under the water quality regulations, then it is a mandatory 100-foot setback regardless of the buffer circumstances. If it is a public water supply reservoir, that setback is 400 feet. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Before you go, Neil, let's see if there are any other questions.
Actually, I've got one. So is it correct to assume that the chemistry of the material being applied would comply with existing applicable US EPA and state regulations in terms of contaminants and so on?
Yes, all of the materials that would be applied must be approved by DEQ prior to land application. DEQ maintains what we call an approved sources list, and so we have reviewed the data around each one of those before it's approved, and then we're also reviewing data that's submitted as material is land applied.
Any other questions? Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you, Neil. And for the next item in our report, this is really an update for the board. You have been briefed on this particular permit for Caroline County, Virginia Water Protection Permit number 20-0514 for the Rappahannock River water supply. And again, I want to provide an update. This is a general timeline and some of the history of this particular permit action. Starting with a complete application in February of last year, a public comment period in mid-May through mid-June of last year, and a public hearing that was held on September 25th of last year. Following the public hearing and the comment period, DEQ received an updated summary of the water demand projections by the applicant. We have reviewed that material and requested additional information, which we expect to receive on or before May 12th of this year. And then upon receipt and review of that, we anticipate a revision to the permit and a public hearing, again, on the update of the draft permit for this particular permitting action. And we would expect final action sometime towards the end of the summer this year. So I will pause there.
Questions from the board? Mr. Thomas? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving on to an agenda item, Mountain Valley Pipeline update. Ms. Davenport.
I think you hit that button, or you're just going to use the arrow.
Thank you. I'm just gonna change. So that's on
I need tutorials every time I'm up here because the technology is always a little bit different. Madam Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Nice to see you. I am here to give you a brief update on the status of Mountain Valley Pipeline, the mainline project. Project status. We are at the point where final grading and restoration phases are complete and the permanent stormwater controls have been installed for the project. That means the project is in what's called post-restoration phase, which means the work is done, and we will be monitoring it for the next couple of years to make sure that the permanent vegetation has taken hold, that the E&S measures that have been installed are in fact doing the job they need to do, that we have vegetative cover that is uniform and mature enough to actually survive and inhibit any further erosion from the project site. What are we doing? We continue to inspect the erosion and sediment controls in place just to make sure that everything is operating as is specified, and also that controls that are no longer needed are removed. So we are moving from removing erosion and sediment control practices, but making sure that permanent stormwater practices are in place. Really, it is making sure that we are looking at areas that need additional work in terms of stabilization, and then repairing areas where there may have been vegetation not well enough established to do its job. There are also some limited areas of the right-of-way where Mountain Valley is going back and installing full-length water bars. So that's going to cover the entire disturbed right-of-way versus just the final the permanent right-of-way where there have been failures identified. Compliance activities, this is for the period December 1st through March 21st of this year. We have investigated 2 complaints. Our third-party contractor, MBP, has not inspected any, but MBP does continue to walk the pipeline and make sure all of these post-restoration activities are sound. So they have done almost 400 compliance inspections over the period. We have issued notices for corrective action in 42 instances. And as you may recall, stipulated penalties run about a quarter behind. So for the fourth quarter of 2024, there were 3 instances of noncompliance that resulted in a stipulated penalty payment of $11,500. At the December board meeting, I can't recall who, it may have been Madam Chairman, asked about total stipulated penalties that have been collected. So from the period of September 2019 through the end of December 2024, $221,000 in stipulated penalties have been paid under the terms of the consent decree. So with that, are there any questions?
Any questions from Ms. Davenport? Nice work, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're moving on to future meeting dates. Those are to be determined. Still yet? Okay. And public forum time. So we do have some commenters ready. All right. So before we move into the public forum for calling the citizens, the members of the public may address the board on matters other than those on the agenda or pending regulatory actions. The time allotted for public comment will not exceed 45 minutes. And those persons wishing to address the board during this time should indicate their desire on the sign-up cards and limit your presentations to 3 minutes or less. There will be no pooling of minutes during the public forum, and each speaker's elapsed time will appear on the screen. I don't think we have that. We're working off of a cell phone today. So speakers will also receive notification from the chairperson or some staff member as to the time limit. Ms. Porterfield, how many individuals do you have registered today?
Madam Chair, we have 2 individuals. Are you ready to start?
I'm ready if this board is.
Okay. The first one is Dean, and I would like for you to say your last name. Okay. It's Naujjoks? Yes. Okay, thank you. So I have
the microphone's here, and I do have a timer. We'll set.
Thank you.
Right.
So, Madam Chair, members of the Water Control Board, good morning. My name is Dean Nax. I'm the Potomac Riverkeeper Network. And, there's been a lot of coverage on the issue of biosolids and sewage sludge and the issue of PFAS contamination. A lot of Texas cattle farmers, their meat is contaminated. We have dairy farmers in Maine that can no longer sell their milk. Their lands are being taken out of production. This is a huge problem nationally, and it's a big problem here. And I recently attended a public hearing information session. DEQ said that they're aware of this problem, that they're aware of this issue. Synagro at that meeting basically told us flat out that they are testing their biosolids. They're finding PFAS in their biosolids. And that, but DEQ hasn't requested that information. EPA recently listed PFAS, PFOA as hazardous substances. EPA also developed human health criteria for water, fish, and seafood. And DEQ's own data from Nominee Creek on the Potomac River, where I operate, has shown high levels, upwards of 3 times higher than EPA's recommended standards for water quality. On January 5th, EPA released a draft sewage sludge risk assessment, basically highlighting the dangers to farmers and just the overall dangers of the PFAS in these biosolids. And unfortunately, DEQ has taken no action on this issue. And it's becoming a huge controversy, as you saw through the hearing. MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, actually exercised its authority 2 years ago, the same authority that Virginia DEQ has. And they put pause on new biosolid application permits. They started testing. And from all the tests, 22 sewage plants, they found that high levels of PFAS in all the biosolids they were testing. Richmond Times just did an article on this issue, talking about the controversy around it and highlighting the concerns from farmers and watermen. This is a letter from the Washington Sanitary Sewer Commission that just came out last week to Senator Love in Maryland. And it basically says that the majority of WSSC's biosolids are currently applied in Virginia. And so what's happening is there's testing biosolids in Maryland. They're finding the highest levels of biosolids that are not safe for Maryland farms, and they're bringing them over to Virginia. And they're not telling Virginia farmers. And these farmers are unknowingly, and Synagro is asking them to expand the application of these biosolids, knowing that they're contaminated, knowing that they're dirty, and that there's a real public health issue around this. So I think what Synagro is doing is a crime. I think DEQ needs to exercise its authority. And I just really wanted to remind the Water Board that your mission is to protect existing water quality for waters and restore others and safeguard against pollution. And that is your mission, to protect public health and the environment. And so I'm just asking, is anybody on the Water Board going to step up and show leadership? Because DEQ is not doing anything about this. And I just want to know if somebody on the Water Board is going to show some leadership over this issue and protect public health and our farmers and our watermen. This is a huge issue. It's a national issue. But these biosolids are coming from Maryland into Virginia, and somebody needs to do something about it. And you have that authority. DEQ has that authority.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, our next speaker is Lee Deal with the Virginia Watermen's Association.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here. My name is Lee Deal. I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Watermen's Association, also to talk with you about biosolids. We have a big concern with the amount of new biosolids applications, specifically in Essex County, in the Rappahannock River watershed and the Potomac watershed. We are totally not against biosolids, but we would like to ask the board to look into further testings of different chemical compounds in them, heavy metals, microplastics, and whatnot that's within the biosolids, and ask for further testing. With that, that's really all I have to say, is just ask for your help and your oversight on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deal.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes the registered speakers for this morning.
Thank you. Well, at this time, this looks like it comes to the end of our meeting. Anything else coming from the board that anyone would like to say, comments? I'll open it up to the board members.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to request at our next meeting, perhaps DEQ could give us a presentation on its regulatory approach to the issue of PFAS and biosolids.
Sure.
Yes, I think so. We're all good with that. Okay, at this time, I'm adjourning the State Water Control Board meeting. Thank you all for coming.